This is a presentation on describing the program in the grant proposal. I'm Reggie York. This presentation, by the way, is related to programs, human service kinds of programs offered by human service kinds of agencies. That is the context for this presentation. At the completion of this module, you'll be able to distinguish between the concepts of program service and service activity. I put this here because these are different concepts. You need to understand them. And of course, follow the nomenclature of the funding source. If they use the word service, use the word service. If they use the word program, use the word program. If they use them both in the way that it is designed in the instructions. Number 2, show the connection between a proposed program and a selected human need. Your program needs to be shown to be a logical, rational way to address the need that you are addressing in your proposal. Distinguish between program description statements that reveal the program structure and the program's model. These are a couple of the kinds of things that help you show what you're doing so that the reader has a good vision on what that looks like. Number 4, show the connection between objectives and evaluation. You should have an evaluation mechanism for the measurement of the objectives that you are proposing to achieve. What is a program description? Is a description of what you will do? I would say yes. Is it a description of the rationale for doing what you will be doing? I would say yes. What will you accomplish? I would also say yes. So I would say that a program description is a combination of all of the above. What is the purpose of the program description? Is it to inform the funding source the things you will do in order to accomplish the goals and objectives of the grant? Yes, that's what it's about what you will do, what it will look like, and the rationale for that. Should it give the funding source the confidence that your way of meeting human need will accomplish the intended outcomes? Of course, that is a big reason why you do a program description. Should it include a detailed description of how each part of the proposed budget will be spent? I would say no. It's not normally required with a program description. You have a budget part of your proposal that you will offer, and as needed you will provide explanations here. But you don't necessarily need to have a detailed description how each part of the budget will be spent. Some description of that will be fine, but not a detailed description of that. Should it be clear enough that people can envision what it will look like when applied? I would say yes. Sometimes I say you want to know what it will look like walking down the street, so to speak. What should be included in the program description? Goals and objectives, is that one of those things? Yes, of course it is. How about services to be provided? Yes, of course. How about activities included in the services? To some degree, that should be. How about qualifications of staff who will provide the service? If you're offering psychotherapy, will you be using persons who are licensed as psychotherapists? Yes, that is something you should include. How about the rationale for offering the proposed services in order to achieve the intended outcome objectives of the program? I've already mentioned that a time or two, but of course, yes, that is part of what should be included in the program description. The program should be justified, as I just mentioned. Let me offer you 2 basic ways in which it might be. You can offer a justification of the proposed program by either logic or evidence. Logic means, in essence, does it make sense? If lack of knowledge of my problem is one of the reasons I'm having it, then some sort of training to improve my knowledge would make sense. If I have a problem because of peer influence and some kind of interaction with my peers might make sense. The other way besides logic would be evidence. Has this particular program been used evaluated and shown to be effective. Let's look at a couple of examples. What, first of all, to do about drug abuse. Stop, hit the pause button, read this over, and come, then hit it back and come back to me. Okay, you've seen here several potential causes of drug abuse. Knowledge about drugs is not one of those listed. So I would question whether it's justified to offer training about the harm of drugs to fund a body as a solution or as your service. You don't have a good justification for that, because it does not appear that lack of knowledge is a cause of drug abuse. If I'm abusing drugs, but I have a lot of knowledge about it, why do you want to train me about it? Why not do something else that's related to the causes, like my self-esteem, or my social isolation, or my interaction with my peers? Those should be the targets of the service that would be justified by this particular statement. What should the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous treat? The 12-step program offered by AA has been found to be effective in the treatment of alcoholism. It is designed with the dynamics of alcoholism in mind. It was designed many, many years ago, many decades ago, by people working in regard to alcoholism who decided that these kinds of steps would help the alcoholic. It's been treated, been tried, and many people really believe in it. So it's very effective for some people. Now the question I pose to you is, should this program be used in the treatment of depression for people who are not alcoholics? Why not take the 12-step program offered for alcoholics and use it for the treatment of people who are depressed? I actually had a student to make this proposal many years ago in one of my courses. Well, I would say no, because you don't have a rationale for why depressed people would be helped with a program designed for alcoholics. If you happen to know some good things about the similarities between alcoholism and depression, that would lead one to say, well, it makes sense, therefore, to use the 12-step program for the treatment of alcoholism. That would make sense. I'm not aware myself of any such analysis, but that would be what you would have to do to propose this for a grant proposal. The program should be unique. Funding agencies usually want to support something that is unique or special in some way. I think it's very tempting for us in human services to think about how good our programs are and the services we deliver, and how it ought to be supported by grants. So you want to tell somebody, tell a grant funding source, here is our service, it's good, please provide us funds to support that. Well, that makes sense in a way, but it's not something that's going to appeal to funding sources as much as you're showing what is special or unique about the services you're offering. You should spell out what is special. Here are a couple of ways that it could be special. Maybe it's a new approach to service. It may address a special population that is underserved. It might be an evaluation of 2 treatment programs, which has not been done before. Those are just some of the many ways that you could show that your program or the services are special and unique. Here's an example. I want you to hit the pause button, look this over, and then come back to me. As you can see from this description, it shows that the Outreach Project is a new program. That makes it special. It uses a special form of counseling about the mind, body, and spirit, and that's something special. One thing that could be added here, of course, would be, or somewhere in the proposal, why use outreach activities? Why do we need outreach activities in regard to this particular service? That should be discussed in some way. But this is just one simple example of how you could show that there's something special about your program. Let's talk about programs, services, and activities. I do this because the funding source will have its own language. You should follow that language. What do they mean by programs, what do they mean by services or activities or strategies or some other term like that. Follow what the terminology they're using. Here's something I would suggest as one way of conceptualizing things. A program is the broad conception of what is to happen. It includes services. An example would be Child Protective Services could be a program, Adult Mental Health Services could be a program, Medicare could be seen as a program. A service is a more discrete set of activities linked to a broader program. Examples, child abuse investigation could be a part of your Child Protective Services program. Support group for abused wives might be a part of Adult Mental Health Services, and so forth. An activity is a discrete action such as an intake interview. There may be times when you will be talking about all three of these concepts, programs, services, and activities, and you may or may not use these labels depending on what the funding source, how the funding source defines them. What should you include? What label should you use? You should be careful to use the language of the funding source. If they label a program a strategy, then you should use the word strategy, of course. There are various ways to conceptualize programs and services. Again, follow the language of the funding source. Which of the following best fits into the description of the rationale for intervention? Psychotherapy for depressed clients will be offered once weekly for 1 hour each week for periods that will typically be between 4 and 8 weeks. How about this? The psychotherapist employed will have a suitable license for this practice. Or 3, depression is believed to be caused by distorted thinking about life events, thus the treatment will address thinking patterns. Hit the pause button for a moment, look over these 3, and see what your answer to the question is. Well, I would say the answer is 3. Depression is believed to be caused by distorted thinking, therefore we're going to address thinking. That's an example of how to provide a rationale. Well, here's a summary, very brief and very concise. Don't forget that the program description should give the funding source good reason to believe that your program is a justified way to meet client needs. That is the end of the presentation. I hope this is helpful.